Okay. So I'm always curious at this point in the semester, because I'm teaching you something that most of you have no background in and maybe have no interest in. Was there anything about Buddhism that was interesting? I remember your hand went up, and I think 2 or 3 other hands went up. Remind me, what was interesting?
I liked how it was like about letting things go.
Letting things go. Absolutely. Positive living. Yeah. Anything else? Anything apply to my sports people in Buddhism? Zen Buddhism, being in the zone? It really does, people. It's amazing. But it's such a different look at the way we see things. You know, our world is pretty well structured the way we see it. So I want to just review a couple of things with you. There are a couple of things I didn't go into that you'll see on your quiz, and then we'll switch over to Confucianism, which is radically different than Buddhism. So just as a reminder, according to the Buddha, happiness comes from within. You know, we're a society that's based on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But for many of us, happiness has to do with our exterior circumstances. You get a good job, you find the right person, et cetera, et cetera. At least in Buddhism, it says, no, happiness really comes from within. You can find, I'm not sure the right word to use, joy or some kind of pleasure in the world you live in. But to really find your center, it's got to be in you. You've got to come to a place where you're willing to be okay with life on life's terms, knowing that you're going to have to deal with life, but you don't have to be overwhelmed with life. Have I ever shared my 4, what would I call them? I kind of have 4 rules that run my life. Have I ever shared them with you? I had a fellow in an intro who's since gone on to be a professor. Maxims is what we call them, or rules. I mentioned I had 4 rules in my life, 4 maxims. He says, you mind sharing them? And I said, no, absolutely. He said, what's number 1? And I said, oh, well. That covers a lot of ground. What does oh, well mean? What else? What does oh, well mean? Yeah, oh, well, you know. You got to choose your fights, people. Most fights aren't worth it.
It simply means acceptance.
Say it again?
It simply means acceptance.
Acceptance, yes, like, oh, well. Oh, well. Rule number 2 works for me, Bubba. I don't have to be a problem solver. I have to find a way to just be okay, even when I don't feel okay. And he said, what's number 3? Anybody know what number 3 is? TNMP. You guys text. What's TNMP? You're kidding me. I know texting better than you do. TNMP. TNMP. That's not my problem. Oh, yeah. Wow, that's not my problem. Yeah. I wish you luck, but I'm not going to wear that. There's no way. That's not my problem. And have anybody speak Creole? French Creole done in Haiti? No one? Done in Haiti, we do this. Anybody know what that is? EOC. I'm the dinosaur, and I know texting better. EOC. End of conversation.
Just say bye.
Say what?
Just say bye.
I say EOC. No, I don't say anything. I do that down in Haiti. You don't have to talk. And they look at you like, okay. It really gets rid of a lot of extraneous things that really shouldn't grab a hold of you. How many of you know that a lot of things grab a hold of you that really you wish down the road you really hadn't spent any time with? Those false conversations, negative conversations, you know, or hopes and dreams, and we build all these pictures and then they don't come true and we're devastated by them. Well, that's what the Buddha says. The Buddha says that happiness comes within. Now, you get hit with stuff on a regular basis. That's life. How you deal with it, the Buddha says, will determine whether you're going to be happy or not. Happiness comes from within. We're powerless over people, places, situations, and things. If you haven't figured that out yet, a little more time on the planet will help you get that truth. People have a right to determine their own destiny, and they take that right very seriously, and It doesn't do very good to fight with people about their own destinies because they've pretty well made up in their mind how they want life to go. When they fade away, and they will all fade away, then we get right back to where we were before, unhappy or dukkha. You will see dukkha. You need to know what dukkha means. It's the only Buddhist word you're going to see here. The only way we can be free from suffering is to give up our attachments to people and things. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have interactions with them. Of course you do. You have interactions with someone, you're in love with them, you're building a future, and they walk across the street and a 6,000-pound van runs them over and they're dead. What do you do with all your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, your future? Well, you got to go on. It doesn't mean that doesn't impact you and you don't take it seriously, but you have to at some point know how to let go. And again, we do this by following the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, that's just to review what we had yesterday or Tuesday. I need to go over their metaphysics. It's a little different than we have. Now, I told you we look at the same world. In the Western world, reason and experimentation. The sun comes up in the east, goes down in the west, and we prove that over and over again, so that becomes the world we live in. They look at the world differently. It's through intuition and interconnectedness. So their metaphysics, the world they live in, the world and all it contains is a web of interdependence, and independence of things they say is an illusion. Now on Tuesday, we'll talk about Hinduism, and they get into something called Maya, which is the illusion of reality. So this is kind of built on that concept. For them, independence is an illusion. Everything is mutually dependent on everything else and undergoing continuous change. The Buddhist, therefore, believes in what we call process ontology. This is changing. We talked about this in our world. 10 years from now, this will be decayed to a certain degree. 100 years, this will be decrepit, and we might not even recognize it. So for the Buddhists, everything in nature, everything in the world is going through change. They call it process ontology. Therefore, to hold on to something makes no sense. You're involved in things, but to hold on to things makes no sense for them. Everything is going through a process. Reactions to negative emotions like anger only reinforce the illusion of separateness and keep us attached to things and to people. So that's their metaphysics. It's a world of process ontology, people, which means things are ever going through changes. Nothing can be grasped on and stay the same forever. Their epistemology, how do we know things? Knowing happens intuitively rather than rationally. Like a drop of water in an ocean, knowing another drop. Knowing, therefore, is a process that works from the inside rather than the outside. You have a partner, you have a close friend, and you look at them and say, "What'd you say?" And they didn't say anything, but you've heard it in your mind. You know what's going on. Or you call someone, "I was just thinking of calling you." That's from the inside out, rather than hearing the phone ring and answering it. I called a fellow I hadn't seen in 17 years, a week and a half ago. His name's Mark, and we got talking on the phone. He says, "I was just thinking of calling you." How often can that be? 17 years apart. So for Buddhism, that knowledge then is intuitive. It comes from within inside. We don't need to hear the phone ring to call someone. We just feel the need to be connected. And that's that interconnectedness that that Buddhism says is a metaphysical and epistemological reality. They also believe in something called the no-self, and this is really difficult for us in the West to understand. The Western idea that I as a knower stand apart from the object or person I wish to know makes no sense in the context of Buddhist epistemology. Positive Zen meditation frees us from the negativity of suffering. For them, then, it's not that there's nothing, it's the no thing that exists. You're all interconnected to me. You'd be surprised how many times I go home and wonder what's going on for you. And that connectedness stays. I'm not obsessed by it. It's not my problem. But the interconnectedness is there. Every once in a while, one of you, and I'll do this very privately, I'll come into class at some point or maybe after class, and I'll say, "Are you okay in this class? I have thick skin." You can say, "I don't like you. I don't think you're a good professor." I'm just kind of curious because the connection is there and I can't interpret it correctly. Everybody understand that? Do you understand what we mean by sensing connections? And it doesn't have to be just with people we know. It's people we encounter. So for the Buddhists, then, you're not an isolation. John Donne, one of our writers, said, "No man is an island unto himself." In the Buddhist epistemology, no one exists by themselves. So it's not this separateness from reality. It's not a nothingness, it's a no-thingness. We are interconnected to one another in a way that it makes it difficult for us in the West to understand. But I think we have that experience, we just never express it in those terms. And then finally, Buddhist ethics, Just as I can do no harm to one part of myself without the effects being felt throughout the system, so an injury I do to an apparent other is really an injury I do to myself. Do you know how hard it is to button your pants without a fingertip? I would imagine, and you ladies are now included in this, that when you button your hands, your fingertips, these two fingertips are very integral to getting buttons to fit in holes. And then these fingers have memory. And then you lose one. And the whole body reacts to this single loss here. Now we manage it, we master it. But initially it's like, how am I going to do this? That's the interconnectedness that the Buddhist is talking about. So ethically, if I do harm to someone, that harm can also come back to me. This is the concept of karma. And we rarely understand this. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is the sum total of all the acts that we do. Towards the end of the semester, I'll give you a fellow who does a really good presentation, and he says in an instant, you can change the course of your karma. You can make a decision. We see it most, I see it most in the work I've done with alcoholics and addicts. They just wake up one day and decide, this is not working, I need to change the way I live, and they make this change. People say, how did that happen? Well, I just got up one day and I had an epiphany, I had a revelation, I don't want to do that anymore. My boy quit smoking one day, he went through nicotine 1, nicotine 2, whatever you call them, and then one day it wasn't working in his relationship at home, and his wife said, this needs to stop, and the next day he never smoked again. So it's not what goes around comes around, but your karma is a collection of all the facts that you do. You can affect your own karma. In truth, I'm free, but as long as I'm ignorant of the ways things are, I'm bound. This is a paradox. If there's no separate me, how can I continue to feel the effects of my actions through the law of karma? You drive a gateway car where a murder is committed, and you too will be charged with murder. So there's always this connectedness between us. And anytime you want, you need to take the wheels of your own life, and you need to disconnect from things. So you may be going down this path, and you suddenly realize, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, then you need to take control, and you need to go another way. And that's how karma works. You come to the consensus in your mind about the relationship of your life to where you want it to go, and then you have to make a decision to change the way your karma goes. So that's ethics for them. You're in charge of your own life. No more finger pointing, no more blaming other people. We'll get to that when we get to existentialism towards the end of the semester. So any questions about metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics? You see this on your quiz. This is all just hard data, people. You need to know these facts. Okay. So let's switch gears. We're going to talk about Confucianism. China is different. When Confucius arrives, he's what we call a humanistic philosopher. He arrives and China's in chaos. Warlords have been making war with one another for centuries. And there seems to be no end of it. And here this humanistic philosopher comes on the scene and he says, if we change the way we live, we can put an end to the chaos. Doesn't mean we're still not going to have conflict, but we can put an end to the chaos. And Confucius will say the way to put an end to the chaos is to bring regulation back to society. So if you remember the first day of class, I put regulations up on the board. They're called my 9 rules of the classroom. Now, that doesn't always satisfy everybody's need, and sometimes you want to chit-chat longer than when I say time to stop and we need to start class. But those rules bring order to the classroom. And within the confines of those rules, we can operate and we can have a maximal amount of freedom. But structure brings order. And that's what Confucius brings to the table. He says,